colleagues, friends, it's my great pleasure, and I thank the Robert Tressell Festival for asking me to do the introductory words for Senator Bernie Sanders. I just had a little chat with him backstage. I explained to him that we have our own language in this country, that I'm one of the few Aborigines left, and that I have translated his name, and that we're giving it to him for free. And the big change in his name is there's a big old father in the middle. So he's Bernardo Sander Anocht. Our President, Michael D. Higgins, was our guest speaker here last year, and he described the Robert Tressell Festival as a celebration of the power of the collective, those interested in social justice, an ethical society, and an ethical economy. And I think I speak for everybody here tonight when we say, for the last 14 years, you've demonstrated that, and you've made us proud when you've spoken on our behalf. It's very difficult to contemplate what our colleagues, our friends, some of our healthcare worker friends are facing in Gaza. We heard the absolute first-hand description from Omar Barghouti, who works tirelessly to try and have a peaceful solution. You can see how difficult it is. But I think it is important, as the panel spoke about earlier, as Kevin Callanan set out. I was with Kevin on that trip to the West Bank, and what we witnessed and what we were asked was to bear witness, don't be observers. And I hope that the trade union movement in Ireland are doing that. We want to do that, and we think that the best way to do that is to speak about the unspeakable, the bombing of healthcare facilities, the murder of healthcare workers, the absolute non-protection of institutions that mean so much, like the Red Cross and UNRWA. And again, I think it is important to say that the person you're going to hear from now has challenged in very difficult circumstances in the US Senate. And he has said in the US Senate, Israel is making life intentionally unlivable in Gaza. And we need more leaders in the United States and here in Ireland to state that. It's plain speaking. And that's what it is. The message that I think is so central to what the panel spoke about earlier is that we now see money having a big and increasing role in society. But money cannot, and we can't let it trump humanity. We can't let money trump workers' rights, and we can't let money trump decency. And on the subject of workers' rights, a subject that this senator that you will hear from has championed for decades. I think as a trade union movement in Ireland, we need to be very clear that the threat of tariffs, we will not accept the use of that to reduce workers' rights, to delay the implementation of the minimum wage. To prolong sick leave for workers in the private sector, to reduce and make it more difficult to have flexible working conditions, which many women at work, and right now there are more women affiliated to the Irish Congress of Trade Unions as working women than men. That's historic. And that must continue, and to continue, you need flexible working conditions and you need good state-provided childcare. These are not privileges. These are the bare minimum that workers deserve. And I want to commend our colleagues in the Irish Congress of Trade Unions who operate north of the border for their tireless campaigns of industrial action that has led to improvements. And we see now that they're in discussions on an employment rights bill, and it is a significant step forward, which has been brought about by their sustained campaign of industrial action, and fair play to them. As well as Bernie Sanders and Senator Bernie Sanders championing trade unionism and working people's rights, we're actually delighted to also be joined tonight by his wife Jane, who strongly advocates for working people and for healthcare as a human right. Gur maith Jane. We cannot accept, and we don't accept, that greed and fear will fuel for the future our global economy. We cannot accept the excuse that the global economic turbulence caused by those who will best be served by it is an excuse to deny workers decency and respect. Bernie Sanders advocates for working people. He upholds the ideals of Robert Tressell, and he didn't need to read the book. He could actually have written it himself. So, Cuireann sé, ordíonn sé mo chraí, fáilte chuir chun labhart libh an seanadóir neamhsplách ó an Stát Móntín Glas, the independent senator, Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much, and let me thank the Tressell Festival for inviting Jane and me to Ireland. And it is a pleasure once again to have met with your president, who is, I think, regarded internationally as one of the great progressive leaders in the world. President Higgins, thank you so much. Tonight, I think it's best that I not give you a speech because I assume we are all on the same side and I don't have to convince you of much. And I think what would be maybe most valuable if I just reflected for a few minutes about what is on your minds and the minds of the people of the United States and people all over the world, and that is what the hell is going on in Washington right now. And then if we have time, I'd be happy to take a few questions. The first point that I want to make is whatever you may say about Trump, what he does is way out in the open. And that is that when we talk about oligarchy and the fact that in the United States today we have a government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires, Trump is in absolute agreement, nothing to hide. When he gets inaugurated, right behind him, he has the three wealthiest people in America, Mr. Musk, Mr. Bezos, and Mr. Zuckerberg, right behind him. And right behind them were 13 other billionaires who he had nominated to head up major government agencies. So what we are dealing with right now in an unprecedented way and way out in the open is an oligarchic form of society. And that oligarchy is taking the form in income and wealth inequality. In America today, we have more inequality than we have ever had in the history of the United States. And one of the manifestations of oligarchy and the fact that these guys own the media is that the most important issues facing the people of the United States are very rarely discussed. But one of the issues that is not discussed is the reality, if you can believe it, that one guy, in this case Mr. Musk, one person, owns more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. One person. What we are looking at right now is a nation in which the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. We're looking at a nation where now, in unprecedented numbers, the CEOs of large corporations now make 350 times more than their employees. Now, here's, again, a reality. You know, people say, well, how did Trump get elected? We'll talk about that. What you have to understand is that in the United States, you know, people think, well, the United States is the wealthiest country in the world. Everybody in America must be doing well. But understand that in America today, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Is that a phrase you know here in Ireland? Okay. And what we have seen, and this is also incredible, when you want to understand why people are angry, over the last 52 years, in terms of inflation accounted for income, despite a huge explosion in worker productivity, workers are now producing far more than 50 years ago. The average American worker is making less in weekly salary than he or she did 52 years ago. Hard to believe. After 52 years, tremendous increase in technology, worker productivity, people are in many ways worse off than they were back then. And during that period, again, not talked about, but according to a variety of studies, over a 50-year period, there was a $75 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. In America today, it's not just income and wealth inequality, it is concentration of ownership. Today you have in every sector of the American economy a tiny handful of corporations who control that economy and who control the prices that American workers pay for their products. And when you talk about concentration of ownership, understand that three major Wall Street investment firms, BlackRock, you're all familiar with BlackRock? State Street, Vanguard. These three companies combined the three, are the major stockholders in 95% of American corporations. That is economic power. And now, when people say, well, what's going on in America, what is not widely understood around the rest of the world is the fact that we have a political campaign finance system that is massively corrupt. And if you ask me the major issue, the major crisis we face politically in the United States, it is that corrupt campaign finance system. It's not so. It's not just that a small number of billionaires control the economy. They now pretty much control the political system. What does that mean? It means that there is a result of a terrible, terrible Supreme Court decision, I think it was 15, 16 years ago, called Citizens United. And what that Supreme Court decision said is that billionaires, so to speak, have the freedom of speech to express themselves politically. And what that means is that right now you set up an organization called a Super Political Action Committee, a super PAC. Billionaires can put as much money as they want into that PAC, which then does a lot of advertising or organizing or whatever it may do. Elon Musk himself spent $270 million to elect Donald Trump. So billionaires now can spend as much money as they want, and it influences not just the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party as well. And let me jump in here and say a word about Gaza, because it is directly related, believe it or not, to the corrupt campaign finance system that we have. If you go around America and you say to the American people, well, do you think we should continue to give the extremist Netanyahu government more money to do the horrific things that they are doing in Gaza right now? A majority of the American people will say no. Not an overwhelming majority, but a majority will say no. We should not be giving U.S. military aid to Netanyahu. In that regard, by the way, I've introduced the key resolutions to stop that funding for Netanyahu. But But what I want to say is, on that bill, we got 15 votes. There are 100 members of the U.S. Senate, and we got 15 votes. Why did we get 15 votes? And that has to do with the power of super PACs like AIPAC, which is a pro-Israeli PAC. And what they say, and this is what goes on, I want people to understand that, because you're not going to understand American politics unless you understand this. On the Republican side, right now, as you may know, there's a terrible bill just passed a few days ago in the House. If any member of the Republican Party stood up and said, you know what, I think it's a terrible idea to give tax breaks to billionaires and cut programs for working class people, health care, nutrition, education. You know what happened to that Republican? The next day, Elon Musk or somebody else would say, you are going to be primaried. We're going to have a candidate running against you in the next election. We have unlimited amounts of money to spend. You're going to lose. On the Democratic side, if somebody stands up and says, you know, I can't support from a moral basis or anything else giving billions of dollars to this right-wing extremist government in Israel, the next day, AIPAC would say, all right, we're going to go after you. And they have a good chance of defeating that candidate. So what we need to do in America, in order to begin the process of creating a government that works for ordinary people, that has a moral compass, is we've got to overturn this terrible Citizens United Supreme Court decision and move to public funding of elections. But when you talk about the America of the United States today, it's not only concentration of ownership and income and wealth inequality, it is control over the media. All of you know that Elon Musk owns Twitter. Mr. Zuckerberg owns Meta. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. What does that mean? It means that many of the most important issues facing our country, income, wealth, inequality, a disastrous foreign policy, do not get the discussion that they need. Now, while the very richest people in America have never, ever had it so good, what's going on for ordinary Americans? It's just a study that came out just the other day by a group called the Ludwig Foundation. And what they found is that, again, about 60% of Americans today, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, are finding it hard to pay for the basic necessities of life. Got it? They can't afford rent. They can't afford health care. They can't afford child care. They can't afford to send their kids to college. And if their car breaks down and they have a $1,000 expense to repair that car, many people are unable to do that, can't get to work, lose their job, situation becomes even worse. So it's not widely known and perceived, I think, around the world as people, oh, the American economy is very strong. Yeah, for the people on top. But we have 60% of our people who are really in trouble. One of the concerns that I have about our two-party system is that over the years, the Republican Party has moved from being a center-right party, which it was under George W. Bush and for many years, to becoming not only a right-wing extremist party, like some of your right-wing parties here in Europe, but also a party increasingly becoming part of a cult of the individual. Very, very hard for any member, elected member of the Republican Party, to stand up to Trump. Because all he has to do is say, hey, some bad things about you. I'm announcing my support for another candidate. You're out of office. You're going to lose your election. That, combined with Elon Musk's money, is a lethal level of opposition. The Democratic Party also, over the years, has lost its connection to the American working class. And what we have seen in recent years is white working class people voting in significantly high numbers for Republicans. We're seeing Latino working class people voting for Republicans, and even some black former Democrats now voting for Republicans. And that has everything to do with the fact that the Democratic Party, which years ago was understood to be the party of the American working class, cut those ties. It has very weak grassroots support, dominated in very significant ways by corporate interests. So you have both parties, different interests, but heavily controlled by powerful billionaire contributors. Under Trump, what we have seen, among many, many other things, is a significant drift toward authoritarianism. And this, maybe of all of the things that he's doing, is perhaps the most frightening for the American people. What does that mean? In America, in our Constitution, which is a pretty good document given that it was written way back in the 1790s, we have a separation of powers. You got an executive branch, a legislative branch, a judiciary. And what Trump has done day after day is illegally and unconstitutionally usurp the power of Congress. Money that we appropriated, he illegally withheld. Elon Musk and those folks are going all over Washington, laying off tens of thousands of workers illegally without any due process as well. They're destroying what we call the National Labor Relations Board, which is the means by which workers get their union votes certified. And then that's just what they are doing through the executive branch. They are also now going after the judiciary in an absolutely unprecedented way. When judges now rule against Trump and his decisions, which many of them are doing, what Trump is now saying is, well, let's impeach that judge. So rather than accepting the verdict, which is what our Constitution is about, they are now looking at impeaching judges. Unbelievable. They are going, as you know, after universities. All right, when universities have a campus where people are concerned about other things, what's going on in Gaza, Trump and his friends are jumping in, threatening, as you know, Harvard University, many other universities, literally telling them what they can and cannot teach and the kinds of professors they want to teach those courses. Just the other day, as you may have seen, a judge overruled this. Trump decided to punish Harvard by not allowing them to have international students, which would be a death blow to Harvard University. He is also, as part of this authoritarian trend, going after law firms. So you have large law firms who represent clients who have gone up against Trump and his friends over the years. And he has said to those law firms, again, absolutely illegally, he said, fine, your law firm has gone against us. Guess what? You ain't going to do business with the United States government. They make a lot of their money by representing clients and corporate interests with the government. You're not going to be able to do that anymore unless you reach a settlement with us. So many of them have paid Trump's presidential library or whatever it is, just kind of extortion, millions and millions of dollars in order to be able to continue doing their work. And shamefully, many of these law firms whose job it is to defend the rule of law have caved in. Not all of them have. A number of them are fighting back, but many of them actually caved in. And what is equally frightening, or maybe more so to me, is his attacks on the media. So what he has done is gone after ABC, one of our large networks, ran a story he didn't like, sued ABC. ABC cowardly forked over, I don't know, $15 or $20 million to him. He sued Meta. He has sued CBS for $20 billion because he didn't like an interview 60 Minutes did with Kamala Harris. That is beyond, from the history of the United States, is literally beyond belief that a president can say, I don't like that story, didn't work for me, I'm suing you. And right now, as we speak, CBS, the owner of CBS, a company called Paramount, is literally in negotiations with Trump and may end up forking over millions of dollars. So what is all of that about? On top of that, I should mention he's going after our public news programs in terms of National Public Radio and the public broadcasting system, trying to cease funding for them. He has called networks like CNN and MSNBC illegal, threatened a lawsuit against the New York Times. So like any authoritarian, he wants media to bow down to him. He doesn't want to see any critical stories, and he's waging an all-out attack against the media in the United States. Now, to my mind, one of the reasons, and maybe the major reasons as to why Trump is president, is not because the American people do not believe in climate change. Most Americans do. It is not because the American people believe we should give tax breaks to billionaires and cut back on programs desperately needed by the working class of America. It is not because Americans think we should dismember the Social Security Administration or lay off 83,000 employees at the Veterans Administration. Very few Americans support that. So why is Trump president? Why did he win? Why did he win the support of a majority of the American people? And the answer has everything to do with the fact that working class people believe that the Democratic Party no longer represents them. And by the way, this is not just an American phenomenon. It is happening to social democratic parties all over the world. And these parties have got to make a choice. If they think they are going to survive defending a status quo, which is destroying the lives of millions of workers in America and around the world, they are dead wrong. And the choice that those parties have to face in America and around the world what we need right now, all over this world, is an understanding that we are at war with an oligarchy that could care less about the people in Palestine, care less about the people in Ireland, or care less about the people in the United States of America. And let me tell you something. These guys are moving very, very rapidly. And I want to make this clear, because I'm in the middle of this struggle right now. When you see tens of thousands of federal employees in America thrown out of their jobs without any due process, arbitrarily, what the hell do you think Elon Musk and the oligarchs are going to do to the workers in Ireland or any other country? Now, these oligarchs are not like the rich. I'm not an historian, but my impression is they are not like the wealthy of past generations. The rich have always wanted tax breaks. The rich have always wanted to break unions, anti-unionism. These guys are different. And the difference is they do not believe in the concept of government. They do not believe in democracy. You know, 150 years ago, there was this divine, the kings in Europe and the Tsar in Russia, they sold their constituents that they had the right to rule, the divine right to rule. God told them that they had the divine right to work, and if you were a serf and you were a peasant, you were a worker, couldn't afford your families, God determined that. And in many ways, this is what Musk and the oligarchs believe and want. They believe they are the high IQ people who have developed these big technology companies. They are so smart. They have created billion-dollar companies. They have the right to rule, and they don't want you or democracy or government or unions or consumer groups to get in the way. That is what we are dealing with right now. And I will tell you that they are moving very, very rapidly. This artificial intelligence and the robotics, what they did to federal employees, and we're seeing it right now, literally, what they did to federal employees is a signal to every corporation in America, hey, we did it, you can do it. And if your workers stand up, you tell them they got machinery coming in, we got AI coming in, we got robotics coming in, we don't need them anymore. So if we do not get our act together, if we do not raise a class consciousness which understands that technology must be used to benefit working people, not just to make the billionaires even richer. And if we don't raise the consciousness to understand that in the world we live today, there is no reason why we should be experiencing the kind of poverty and economic misery that we are. Economic rights, as I think most people in this room know, are human rights. People have a right to quality health care. They have a right to decent housing. They have a right to good quality education. They have a right to decent incomes. This is not a utopian vision. We're not living in the 1850s anymore. We have the technology to know how to create the wealth that we need to create a decent life for every man, woman, and child. We can do it, but we can't do it unless we come together globally, unless the working class stands up and says, enough is enough to the oligarchs. They are not going to have it all. It is our world, and we're going to take power and create the kind of society that works for all of us. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.